Okay, so hello students, welcome to another session with respect to enrolled agent part 3 and the concerned appropriate subunit is 1.2 which is related to conduct of practice. If we talk about conduct of practice, so that means when you are as such serving as a practicing CPA or EA or maybe an attorney, so how you should actually, since you are a member of a professional body, so it becomes your responsibility to show the code of ethics to show and how you are supposed to behave. So let's discuss about it as stipulated in part 10 of Circular 230. Now, there might be a situation as to you must be thinking, ma'am, this part 10 of Circular 30 needs to be remembered. No, part 10 need not be remembered. As to the conduct of practice is incorporated in the part 10 of Circular 230. No, but circular, it's in there in Circular 230. This is to be remembered for sure. So what are the rules for conduct of an attorney, a CPA, or an enrolled agent in practice before the IRS are provided in this applicable sections. And those sections are incorporated in part 10 of Circular 230. Unless otherwise indicated, a practitioner includes anyone preparing a tax return. For example, maybe an attorney, a CPA, or an enrolled agent. So if you particularly talk about a practitioner, if you talk about a practitioner as such, so it includes whosoever, whosoever means anyone what is really, really important. Practitioner includes anyone who is preparing a tax return. But at the same time, when we talk about this qualified terminology, so it means the person who is representing a taxpayer before the IRS must be qualified. He must be an enrolled agent or a CPA or an attorney, whatever the scenario is. So that means the person representing a taxpayer before the IRS must be a qualified person who is authorized to practice before the IRS. So that means in a nutshell, in layman's language, only those persons can take up your cases before the IRS body who are qualified in the eyes of IRS. And in the last unit 1.1, we covered that. Who can practice before the IRS, right? Also in point 1b, it is stipulated a power of attorney or written authorization from the taxpayer is insufficient. Point to be noted, my dear students. So they are like, and A point says the duty may not be delegated to an employee of the qualified practitioner. So there are two important things and super duper important 2 to 3 MCQ might be asked from this area. So we have said the person must be a qualified person, whether a qualified EA, qualified CPA, qualified attorney, on the list goes on. That means obviously he is a member of one of the bar and all in case of attorney. But if we talk about a practitioner, the duty may not, it's not mentioned might, it's not mentioned must. The auxiliary verb which has been used here is may word, may. That means duty somehow to some extent may be delegated, but the ultimate responsibility will be of the practitioner only. This is what this modal or auxiliary verb stands here, right? So that means when we are talking about this thing, the duty may not be delegated to an employee of the qualified practitioner. So that means usually you cannot delegate your responsibility to your employee. However, if you're getting the things done through your employee, the ultimate responsibility will be yours only being a qualified practitioner. And at the same time, a power of attorney, that means power of attorney means to say you are having a written authorization from your client, from the taxpayer. It is not solely or only sufficient. You must be a qualified person. That means, for example, Let's talk about Sunil. Sunil, as of now, and he's not annual filing season program participant as well. He wants to represent, not he's not filing the tax return. He wants to suppose Mr. Y has received a notice from the department, from the IRS department. Okay, so you have understated your tax liability. So this is the notice. Meet in person at the department. So Sunil doesn't want to appear in person. So he hires his friend Sudhir, who is, as such, has not been given any specific permission from the IRS department, who is also doing an enrolled agent course, but has not been given any specific power. So here, even if Sudhir gives power of attorney or the written authorization to Suneet, his friend, so that will not be sufficient. My dear student, that will not be sufficient because you must be a qualified person. And as far as the qualified person is concerned, so that means we have already covered it in a very detailed manner in the unit 1.1. However, if the situation would have been different, Sunit would have been an enrolled agent and he's getting the work done through Mr. A, who is his employee. So in this situation, he can get it done, but the ultimate responsibility and the review has to be ought to be done by the practitioner, that is enrolled agent. This is what they are talking about here in the qualified section. And here we talked about power of attorney. We talked about power of attorney or the written authorization. Now let's talk about this. If we talk about the declaration, a written declaration that the representative is both qualified as well. So that means he's a qualified EA or a CPA or an attorney or has been given specific permission or maybe an enrolled actuary or AFSP limited rights or whatsoever the situation is. The point is AFSP, obviously he is not allowed to represent the case. He's not given only limited powers. So what this declaration is all about? So the content we are going to have a discussion. So written declaration means as to the person who is representing the taxpayer or the client on this behalf, he has to be both. So that means both the condition needs to be complied with. He has to be a qualified person and as well as he must be authorized to represent the particular principal, must be filed with the IRS. So that means power of attorney or written declaration or permission must be given by the client to whom? To the practitioner, and this must be filed with the IRS department as well. So that means in the previous example, let's change the circumstances a little bit. So Sunit is like, he has received a notice from the department and his friend Sudhir. He's an enrolled agent by profession. So, but still, a power of attorney, if he wants to represent his case before the IRS, so Sudhir needs to give what? A written declaration, a power of attorney, and it must be filed with the IRS as to his friend or in the given situation that enrolled agent would be representing his case. So that means both the conditions, need to be complied with. He must be a qualified person and as well as he must be authorized as well to represent the particular principal and this must be filed with the IRS department as well. When we talk about information which is furnished by the clients, to what extent you should rely on that? Obviously, being a practitioner, being an enrolled agent, being a CPA, being an enrolled actuary, etc., you are a practitioner. So to what extent you can rely on information which has been furnished by the clients? Basically, a practitioner advising a client to take a position on a tax return document, affidavit, or other papers submitted to the IRS or preparing or signing a tax return as a preparer generally may rely in good faith without verification upon information furnished by the client. What does that mean? I read it so fast. Let's break it down. A practitioner who gives advice to his client with respect to, now these are really very important. These three terminologies, super duper important from examination perspective. So you need to pay 100% focus here for the next 10 minutes. A practitioner advising a client to take a position on a tax return document or affidavit. So that means if a practitioner is ought to give advice to the client, be it related to the tax return, to any affidavit or document or other paper, generally he may rely in good faith without verification upon information furnished by the client. However, he may not, super duper important, two MCQs for sure in the actual examination, for sure. So this point number 3 is super duper important, super duper. Especially this point number A, point number B, very, very important. So this is highly tested area in the actual examination. So you need to pay special focus here. However, the preparer mean to say tax practitioner. Here the preparer mean to say the preparer may not ignore the implications of the information. He must make reasonable inquiries wherever needed to see to it whatever information is furnished is accurate and complete. And at the same time, the preparer should make appropriate inquiries of the taxpayer about the existence of the documentation for deductions. That means the preparer, he should make appropriate inquiries of the taxpayer about the documentation for deduction. So that means whatever information has been furnished to you by your client, you should make reasonable inquiries if you find that information suspicious, inaccurate, or incomplete. And at the same time, again, this area, very important, it is average tested area with respect to the MCQ in the examination. The preparer should make appropriate inquiries of the taxpayer about the existence of the documentation for deductions. Now, this is really very important. The IRS department actually wants to have motives from the taxpayers, because of which it wants to cross-confirm whatever deductions they have been claimed by the different taxpayers. So those very particular deductions are correct or not. So for this, the preparer should make appropriate inquiries of the taxpayer about the existence with respect to the every documentary evidence for the same. If you are claiming a deduction, what is the documentary evidence for the same, so that it can be produced to the department if required. This is what they're talking about. Now, conflict of interest. Another area, conflict of interest. If we talk about conflict of interest, again, highly tested area in the actual examination, highly tested area. According to section 10.29 of Circular 230, section 10.29, a conflict of interest exists. So that means if, because here the, sorry, conjunction which has been used is or, not and. Here also the conjunction is or, not and. If any of these condition prevails, then we will stipulate as to there is a conflict of interest. So that means it's an exhaustive list. Whatever I'm narrating as of now will be crystal clear in another 5 minutes. If we talk about the conflict of interest, so that means it exists if the representation of one client will adversely impact the another client. So that means if you are giving advice to two persons, and because if you give advice to one of the person, it will not be justifiable to the other person, and this will be covering in one of the example as well while attempting MCQ in the next session. As of now, you need to understand the representation of one client will adversely impact another client. So that means if you are giving advice to one client, it will prejudice the interest of the other client. So there comes the existence of conflict of interest. And in next session, we are going to cover not only one or two, rather many examples and context of it, because we'll be covering till point number 4 into the session. So let's understand the basic overview with respect to the point number 4. So that means if the representation of one client will adversely impact another client, or, so the conjunction is or, there is a significant risk that the representation of one or more clients will be materially limited by the practitioner responsibilities. If there is a significant risk, if you are giving advice to more than one client, so your professional responsibilities are affected because of it. Why? Because maybe you are giving a representation to one of the client to the another client, or maybe the client who is a former client or a third person, or by a personal interest of the practitioner. So as of now, we can say this topic, point number 4, the perplexity may arise in your mind, but in next session, we'll be covering end-to-end 4 to 5 case studies related to the point number 4 only, 4 to 5 case studies, so that things become easy for you. As of now, you are supposed to have an idea. If there is a conflict of interest, so you should not accept that professional consultancy. And if you talk about the conflict of interest, so that means one client's interest is adversely affected because of the other client, or maybe a former client, or by the personal interest of the practitioner. So as of now, whatever we have covered till point number 3, you'll be able to attempt some of the MCQs, but from point number 4, I'll be covering at least 5 to 7 case studies to cover point number 2. Okay? In next session, in our tomorrow session, we'll be covering 5 to 7 case studies. Then we will come back to the point number 5 in the next session.